All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on a Shirt Lab workshop. Today, we're going to learn all about how to match Pantone colors. This is a really much needed thing in the industry. And if you struggle with it or struggling with mixing ink, my good friend Mark is going to explain all of that today. So I'm sure it's going to be a good thing for you. So during the presentation, feel free to throw a question in the chat, and if we get to a minute, we'll read your question and get it answered. Also, this video will be sent to everyone who registered, and if you're a member of Shirt Lab Tribe, we will have this available for you on our platform. And if you're not a member of Shirt Lab Tribe, I recommend that you join that. That's our mastermind group, and you can join at shirtlabtribe.com. Your membership dues cover every single employee in your company, so it's a really great way to educate your staff on what's going on in the industry. Also, I'd like to say that upcoming in December, we have Mark Coudray doing a fantastic workshop on managing by the numbers, which is all about understanding your financial info, your P&L statements, that type of stuff. This is going to be not a free event. It's $97. But if you're a member of Shirt Lab Tribe, it is free. Also on December 15th, Christina Marcantelli with S&S Activewear will be hosting a workshop on 2023 industry trends. So look forward to those in December. And thank you for signing up if you've already signed up. So with me today is Mark Suhadolnik with GSG. So how you doing today, Mark?
Good.
So if somebody is in a parts of the country that doesn't have GSG, can you let everybody know what you guys do?
We are one of the largest distributors for our industry for screen, sign, digital in the United States. We have 9 locations throughout Texas, all the way to Minnesota, Oklahoma, Ohio, Louisiana. So basically anything you need for screen print, embroidery, sign, digital, LED, we're a source for that.
And what do you do specifically for them?
I am the applications specialist for textile for the screen division. So I teach our classes, I do consulting, I do the R&D on all the new products that we carry, existing products. I do product testing if customers have issues. I do all of our instructional and educational videos on YouTube, our YouTube channel for Graphic Solutions Group. And that's a little bit of it in a nutshell.
That's great. And so if anybody watching this webinar has any issues with what they learned, would you be able to help them?
Oh, absolutely. My email's right there. That's the best way to contact me. Absolutely.
All right. Well, great. So let's go ahead and get going. And first, before we get into the meat of the presentation, I want to thank our sponsors, and here they are for 2022. We're going to have some new sponsors for next year, but this is this year's sponsors. So thank you very much for all you guys for supporting us, and you make stuff like this happen, and we really appreciate it. And you can see GSG right there in the upper right-hand corner. So thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jim. All right, so let's get started with a short little video here, and this is how you guys normally mix colors, and we thought it might be interesting to have everybody understand how you do it on an industrial level. So Mark, what are we going to see here?
Well, this is our color match department. We mix approximately 500 gallons a day of custom colors, whether for in-house or for customers. And for this video, we'll be using the Avient DM4 dispenser, and this dispenses actual pigments into base, and we can mix any color in the Pantone book.
All right, well, let's watch the video. It's about 3 minutes.
I'm Mark Suhadolnik with GSD, and today we're in our color match department. In our color match department, we mix Pantone colors for our customers in the screen printing side of our industry. We're using the Wolflex DM automated dispenser. And now, pulling up right now, we're going to see the Pantone 123C. We're going to be mixing 1,000 grams, which is going to be important. And as you can see on the monitor here, it's actually counting down as it's adding the base into the actual bucket, and then it's going to go through and it's going to add each individual color. Once the base fenced into the bucket, the DM4 is going to automatically rotate, and we're going to start to add in our pigment concentrate into it. Then we'll take this larger bucket, we'll mix that in, we'll check it out, make sure it matches the color, and then we'll put it into a quart container, and it'll ship out to the customer. How do we adjust our formulation? We have our Atkinson 123C, great effect to the port for a label on it. Consider when you have a VSC mix with Pantone colors, one, we can do standard shipping, 300 grade, and we also do low tier day, which is going to appear at 270 a day. For more information on GSD color match, in order for your custom Pantone color matches, visit GoGSD.com. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Man, you can stir some ink pretty fast there, Mark. So here's some still photos of the DM4. And I've been to shops that actually have these. So you can, if you mix enough ink, this is something that you might need for your shop. But for most people, it's a little pricey. So
Yeah, we have quite a few customers that have them. If you're doing a lot of colors, you have a lot of presses, it's definitely the way to go.
yeah, so here's what we're going to cover today. First is Pantone color ink mixing basics. We're also going to talk about just the actual printing process and the effect on color. We're to get into using a color spectrometer and understanding what the term delta E means, and also common problems and solutions. Also, if you're a member of Shirt Lab Tribe, I recommend looking up in the Shirt Lab circle under under videos. I can't remember where I put the video. I did one with Jesse Martinez with Matsui on actually using a color spectrometer to dial in color. And we did that about a year or two ago. So that video is already available for our tribe members. So you might want to check that out. So let's get into Pantone color ink mixing basics. And this is our trusty Pantone book. So Mark, what are your thoughts on this thing?
Well, you can tell by that one, it's brand new. You want to replace them at least every 2 years, because they will fade. They do update them yearly. It's a little bit of expense, but it's really not much. But I would absolutely, keep one in your shop and keep it updated.
And what's the difference between, I get this question all the time, should I use the coated or uncoated guide? What should I use? Because t-shirts aren't coated.
You want to use coated because that's just going to be the formulas that most designers will pull out, will give to you. Occasionally you'll see an uncoated color, but it's really not too often. In the 2-pack, you get the 2 books. Usually the uncoated one is, every time I see them, they're still wrapped in plastic. They're never taken out.
Yeah. So ink mixing basics. Let's talk about the equipment that you need. So we talked about the Pantone chipbook. I like to have these, by the way, I like to have one in the ink room and one by each press. Don't you agree with that, Mark?
I guess it depends on how many presses you have. I don't know if I'd want 20 of them on the floor, but the other machine, yeah, I believe you should have definitely in your QC area also, as well as by the machine. So, get a little pricey having that many, but they need to be like readily available. So if there is any question of color, you can pull it out because it may look orange, it may not be orange. So it's really great just to have it to verify.
Maybe have one per dryer, because I don't want to have to walk across the shop to get a Pantone book. That was kind of the comment there. What about mixing spatulas? What, is there any kind that you prefer?
I prefer the stainless steel ones. They last the longest. They clean up really, really easy. You know, there are plastic ones. The plastic ones tend to flex a little bit too much, and you definitely want to stay away from anything that's wooden, especially like a paint stir stick, because the screen printers habitually like to leave those in a bucket of ink, and the actual wood one will absorb the plasticizer out of the plastisol ink. It'll absorb, you know, moisture out of water-based ink, and what's gonna happen on that wood is gonna turn chalky, and then you're gonna get those chunks actually into your ink. So stainless steel has just been my favorite, seems to be the way to go.
Yep. And to mix ink properly, we need a good scale, and we need it to read to 1/100th of a number here. So I forgot how to say that term. So 1/100th, right? So what type of scales do you recommend?
I use the Sartorius. That's a really, really good quality scale. It goes to the point, you know, 0, 0. It's just the accessories it comes with. It's stainless steel. You can easily clean it off. Also, really nice benefit of it, if you're using like the IMS mixing software, you can tether your scale to your computer. So when you are doing your formulations, similar to the DM4, as you're adding the ink into your container, it'll start taking it down automatically and tell you if you're within tolerance, if you may be off by 0.1 gram or 0.07 grams, it'll tell you that you're still fine to go ahead and use that color in the formula.
And I also recommend that occasionally you get your scales calibrated by a professional, just to make sure that they're really measuring accurately.
Absolutely.
What about buckets and containers? Can we just use an old pea can from our house, or do we need something that's a little more, you know, professional?
I've seen everything from coffee cans to, you know, sand buckets you use at the beach. I prefer to stay with, you know, kind of an industry standard, you know, PVC plastic bucket, pints, quarts, gallons. You can get them for the automotive industry also, you know, the clear ones for mixing your paints. They work really well. One thing you want to do is absolutely, you have it on here, is lids. You want to keep your inks covered. We go into, you know, hundreds of shops and there's no lids on any of the inks. They have lint in them, dead flies, dead bees in them, you know, any kind of, you know, debris floating around the shop will end up in that bucket of ink. So I highly suggest put lids. Everything in my lab has a lid on it, and that's the reason.
And also, I'm a big believer in ink is in the inside of the bucket, not on the outside of the bucket. So we need to keep our ink buckets clean, and you shouldn't have to worry that if you reach for an ink container, you're going to get anything on your hand.
Correct.
Whoop. So let's talk about the importance of stainless steel in our ink kitchen.
Number one thing, it's easy to wipe off. If you're using pigments or if you're using equalizers or finished ink, you know, we've all wiped up ink. It smears everywhere you go. Stainless steel is easy to spray off, you know, but both with your table surface and your spatulas, wipe it off, stays clean, looks really neat. I'm a big, you know, fan of stainless steel tables.
So if you have a restaurant depot in your area, go shopping.
There you go.
You can also get the bread racks for your screens. That's a lot of people get them there. So, and then what about lighting? Why do we need to be worried about lighting, Mark?
Because plastisol inks it's called metamerization, and what will happen is, depending what light source you're under, the color will look different. So out on your production floor, to your art room, to your ink department, to outside or in the warehouse, an ink can look 4 or 5 different shades depending on the light. That's why going with the 5000K, which is like a, you know, bluish white, it's the perfect light to look at color under. Almost like cool white fluorescent is perfect for viewing color.
Yeah, 5000K sometimes is called a daylight bulb. Just so you might look for that.
Yeah, especially if you look at browns or orange colors, look at them in the building, then go look at them outside.
Mhm. Right. And then lastly, a color spectrometer. And this is a kind of a new tool that actually it's an old tool that was really expensive, and they have come down in price and availability. And if you're serious about matching colors, if you have clients that are really on you about making sure that that 123 gold is exactly that color because you're printing for McDonald's, the best way to do stuff is to use a color spectrometer, because it is, and we're going to get into it in a little bit, but it's science, not some dude's eyeball.
Exactly.
So more on that to come. So let's talk about ink systems. So we got the alphabet soup here. So Mark, what are all these letters mean?
Well, RFU is going to be your ready for use standard colors. PCs, pigment concentrate. Then you have equalizers, which are basically pigments that are in a base. And then there's finished ink systems. A finished ink is similar to the Wilflex Rio, whereas you can use the inks to mix colors from the Pantone book, or you can use them on their own. You know, they're ready for use to go on to press. It's rather expensive if you use them on their own, but people are attracted to the color.
So later in this workshop, you're going to be mixing some ink, and actually to save time, we went ahead and just filmed it so we can, we can show you and not have Mark do it live. But what type of ink are you using in your demo here?
We're using the Wilflex Rio system. Reason I chose that for this, it's the most popular right now. A lot of people are going towards it because it's already low cure, 270 degrees, and it's an affordable system.
And if somebody was using another ink brand, all of this stuff is still germane to the topic, because we're using the same math and the same techniques. It's just different ingredients.
Yeah, all the brands have, mixing systems, everyone.
So what's the story with grams?
It's all in grams, all of it.
Well, how come it's not in ounces?
We're
Americans, Mark.
I understand that, but everywhere else in the world, everything is on the metric system. Look at water-based ink from Europe. It's all kilos.
That's right.
It's kind of, look, if you look at the scales, your scales come pre-programmed into grams. You can switch them to ounces.
Right.
But.
Yeah. And then what if I'm doing something custom? I'm taking an ink and I'm adding some curable reducer to it, or a puff or something. We always want to make notes on what we did so we can replicate it. Walk us through your thinking on that.
Like anything in a screen print shop, write it down, all the way from what mesh counts and squeegees you're using for a job. So if you have to do that job again, you can start, on a really good, base right there, because you already have a recipe for printing that job. The same comes with inks. If you're going to add viscosity buster, if you add curable reducer, some finesse, or like say a Nova base Fashion Soft into it, write it down, how much you added. And then if you have to make that ink again, you have all those clear notes.
Right. Oh. So what about additives? So what type of additives can we add to our ink, and how does it affect Pantone colors?
Well, there's going to be two things. You have additives and you have bases. Sometimes there's confusion between the two. An additive, for example, is going to be something like a viscosity buster, to break the viscosity down of your ink, or a curable reducer. Then you have your bases, and I don't mean the standard bases for mixing color, but like specialty bases, whether it be a plush, a puff additive, anything that has a blowing agent is going to lighten the color you add it to. So you'll see a lot of times shops will actually print, if they want a red puff, they'll print the red on top of the puff, not really add it into it. If you add it into it, you have to apply a little bit of science and do some math, because you're going to be adding a much darker color because of how much that ink is going to lighten as it expands.
Okay. Labeling your containers just with a 4x6 label, just with a marker, or do you, I know that some systems actually print out the ingredients and all the stuff.
Right.
What do you like?
With the IMS from Avient, for Rutland and for Wilflex inks and for Union, they actually print out the entire formula on the label itself. You print out the label, stick it right on the bucket. I've seen a lot of shops, they'll just put a label and what Pantone number that is. But you have to have some type of label on it so not just, that's Earl's navy blue on the shelf, but Earl doesn't work here no more and we don't know how he made that blue. So it's really important to label your containers.
Right. And I like to put the date it was made and then who made it. So we know kind of, maybe who to blame or how old is that bucket? That thing's been sitting here 4 years, right?
Yeah.
We want to know this stuff. So, all right. And then we always talked about it. Containers always have lids. We can't say it enough. And then also work clean. I'm a big believer in working clean. As you work, you clean up behind yourself.
Absolutely.
Especially when we're mixing ink, because that stuff gets everywhere. Especially if you're trying to hold down the bucket with your feet and you got a drill bit in your hands.
And if you're holding it with your feet, make sure you have a good grip, because we've all seen that bucket shoot across the room.
That's why I'm giggling. So, hey, Ron's got a question. Any comment on Adobe's plan to charge $15 a month to us for Pantone colors in the Adobe suite? Yeah, I've got a comment. It's called money grab.
Exactly.
Pay the man so you can keep working. I don't know any other way around it. In Shirt Lab Tribe, we did post a fake Pantone color chart you can upload to Illustrator that I found, but I'm always a big believer in do it the right way. So all right, so today's lesson, we can mix any color, but we chose 375. Why did you pick that color, Mark?
Green shows up real well on camera. But it's a real bright green, and I've seen a lot of people have issues with this color. It's just kind of why it stands out. It's either going to go really green, drab, or really yellow.
Okay.
So it is one of the more difficult ones to actually mix.
Good. All right, here we go. So here's what we're doing. It's 1,000 grams, which is a quart. And here's the actual formula for 1,000 grams of 375. So you can see any comment on these? How many pigments are there in the system?
This system has 15 total colors to it, including the white. Most of them you're looking at 14 to 16.
Yeah.
Depends on fluorescence.
And accuracy in the amounts is crucial. So can you get almost there, right? Can, instead of like white 233.4, can I just use like 210?
No, a 20 gram difference is way too much. A gram is about the tolerance you want to be over or under for the most part.
So here's a little video we made of Mark mixing this color. Let's check it out.
Now we're ready to mix our color. We're going to be mixing Pantone 375C, which is a really bright green. We're going to be using the Wilflex Epic Rio mixing system. We have our formula pulled up in our IMS software. One important tool that you want to have when you're mixing ink is you want to have a good quality scale that's going to read to 0.00. This Sartorius PMA Evolution scale has a cover on your weight base here, so it'll stay clean. You can wipe this right off. It also has a cover on your controls. So another thing to keep your area really clean. Also, you want to keep a variety of different spatulas. I like using the stainless steel spatulas in different sizes depending on what I'm mixing. because they're very easy to wipe off. They're extremely durable, and you can keep them in a little storage right underneath your scale. First thing you want to do is take your quart container. Another valid point, always have quart containers, pint containers, gallon containers with lids readily available. So after you mix your color, you can put a lid on it, keep all debris, any dust, lint out of the ink. So first thing we're going to do is put our quart container on our scale, and then we're going to tare it to 0, and then we can start with our formulation. The first thing that we're going to add into this is the Rio Electric Yellow, and it's calling for right here 149 grams. So we'll go ahead and we'll add our 149 grams of electric yellow into our quart container. You can always pull out if you add a little too much in. So we're right at 149.8 grams. So we're only off by 0.05 grams. That's really not going to make any difference in our formulation. If it was several grams, then it's going to give you some color shift. So we'll take it, we'll tear it back off to 0, and we're ready to add our next color, which is going to be the Rio Sunshine Yellow at 120 grams. So next is going to be our Rio Mixing White, and it's going to be 119 grams. So tear our scale to 0, and we'll go ahead and start adding in our white. Right at 120 grams. Take it back to 0, and our last color is going to be Forest Green, which is going to be 10 grams. There we have our 10 grams. Now we're ready to take our spatula and let's go ahead and mix this color.
Man, you're good at that, Mark.
A little faster than a turnabout.
Now that we have our color mixed, we can go ahead and do a drawdown and compare it to our Pantone book. Just out of the bucket, comparing the two, it looks like we have a pretty good match from the get-go. We'll tell better when we put it through a 156 mesh screen and do our drawdown print.
Okay, so a couple things here, Mark. The cards you were using, right? Those look like they were pre-made and not just random pieces of cardboard. Where are those from?
Those are the, they're called the Ultimate Cleanup Card. It's one of those things you never knew you needed it until you started using them. We sell them at GSG. I believe every screen print distributor carries those.
Okay.
They're a really nice pre-cut card. They have a little notch on the end. They're great for taking ink out of screens, cleaning off squeegees. They have a like a laminate or plastic kind of coating on them. They're flexible, but they're really durable.
Okay.
They come, I think the box is 1,500 of them is how they come.
All
They're
right.
a great tool to have.
And Daryl Garcia has a question. I'm sure we're going to get to some of this, but let's make sure, okay?
Sure.
Let's also add to the discussion about mixing systems, color and opacity. When mixing ready-for-use ink systems versus pigment systems, base types, HO, low cure, etc., how results rely on the base being used and the pigment load. In addition, add to the discussion substrate, squeegee, mesh, underbase, and these also will affect color. So I know we've got that at the end of the presentation, but let's just make sure we're peppering that in. Okay, Mark?
Sure. Yeah, he's right, especially with pigment systems. You know, you have a variety of different bases between low cure base, a standard base, a high opacity base. The pigment loads are going to stay similar. They're not going to be really off by much. The base is going to determine, you know, your opacity. But Daryl has a good question there. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, just like what we just did, it's all about the grams and following the recipe.
Yeah.
Look. I go backwards?
Yep.
Hold on.
Now we're ready.
All right, enough of that.
Now we're ready to mix.
All right, so here's a picture of the scale and then also your drawdown screen. So talk about the drawdown screen, Mark.
Kind of an industry standard, even, the years I spent working at Wilflex, is we always do drawdowns through a 156 mesh. It's kind of in the middle, it's neutral. So we'll use just a hand squeegee on a manual press, flood the screen and do a single print stroke with it through the 156. And then from there, we'll compare our color in the light box or under our light source or at the color spectrometer.
And you just keep the screen around and you're using anytime you mix a color?
Yeah, I have, this screen is right outside the door from, my ink mixing area in our applications lab. So anytime that I'm doing a color, a specific Pantone color, I'll do the drawdown. I'll do the drawdown on a Lynetta card, which is a half black, half white card. It'll show me the opacity of printing on white and printing on black. And then typically kind of printing on white fabric, black fabric, and heather or athletic gray fabric with an underbase and without an underbase.
And that's a standard for a well-known shoe company, I believe.
That's kind of Nike standard. Not kinda, it is.
Right. And so here's what the final result looked like, right? And you label it. And you
Absolutely.
can keep this probably, right?
Yeah, I'll keep them. In fact, in our color match department, every time that we are rematching color, we keep a file on it where we actually have the drawdown and it's actually stapled onto the report that's printed out from the color spectrometer. So we know the date, who made it, that it was in tolerance and the color matches.
And what are you doing here with this black card?
What the black card is it's just a black piece of cardboard that's cut out. It's black, so it doesn't reflect any light. And what I'm doing is I'm comparing my actual print to the Pantone, chip in the swatch book. And that just blocks out any other light that your eye may be attracted to.
So now we're at printing process and the effect on color. And this is where we start printing and some results, right? And you did this with 3 different types of shirts and 2 underbases. So let's just walk everybody through what you did, okay?
You can see the first one on the white, that's just the 375 on a white shirt. Looks like it does in the bucket, it looks like the drawdown. But then on the gray and on the black, it's a split screen. So there's a white underbase under the left-hand side. You can see how much that color shifted. It dramatically went lighter going on top of the white. And this is a case where somebody may actually flash print the green so it'll match the actual white garment. Or you can go and adjust your underbases to a darker underbase instead of using white. So with going with tan, you can see with the tan, we're still in the same. The one on the black is pretty close to it because you have the black shirt. The one on the athletic heather is still a lot brighter, even with a tan underbase. So your underbase is going to greatly affect your color that you have on top. And that's why you can tend to get away from white underbases and go with tans, go with grays. So with this color, actually, I would end up going with a little bit darker of a gray. You can see across the board the difference in the color. Even though it matched, it passed, it was there, it greatly changes on the garment. And that's the half without the underbase, and you can see with the underbase.
I kind of like it without the underbase. That's kind of a cool look.
I wish everything was without an underbase.
All right, so we have a little movie of you printing. So let's watch that. It's a couple minutes.
Okay, guys, we saw the shirt that we used the white underbase under the 375. We switched it out. We're going to be doing a tan underbase. The tan underbase is going to give us a truer 375 green color, and it's going to match our print across all 3 fabrics that we're going to be printing.
And we did see that even the tan did not match across the board. So
If you're
this
just
is what-
printing a single stroke here, Mark,
Yeah.
how did you coat your screens? 1/1, 1/2, what did you do?
This is 1/1, and this yields about a 20% EOM. Excuse me, and that's with Kiwo Multitex Blue emulsion, a 60/90/60 durometer at about a 15-degree angle, and right at about 25 psi. So they actually look really good on press. Then you go to the dryer, and you get it's going to darken slightly.
Yeah, that's another thing is you, all colors need to be viewed after it's dried because we know that something happens during the curing process.
Yep. And this is where, if this was a real
Okay,
job
guys, we saw the
for a customer, where we'd have to probably switch out an underbase 4 or 5
Solutions Group. Our previous video.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
We would probably, in a production environment, have to maybe go through 4 or 5 different underbases if we had to match that color across every substrate color. So if we had red shirts, green shirts, black shirts, white shirts, or, I've seen a lot of times people will print the underbase on the white garment to make sure it matches across, but that your color is not true then.
Yeah. So here's another video that you sent, which is all about reusing inks to make a underbase gray. So let's check that out.
Solutions Group. Our previous video, we showed you how to recycle your ink into an almost black to use for like outlines and halftones, drop shadows, and sponsor backs. What we're going to do today is we're going to take some of our lighter colored inks that we have, ones that have a lot of white in them, and we're actually going to make these, recycle them into an underbase that's going to be kind of a grayish khaki. And the reason I'm doing this is because of the raw material shortage and the shortage of white ink right now. One of the best ways to cut down your white ink consumption in your shop, don't use it as an underbase. If you look at the automotive industry, when they're painting vehicles, they use a gray primer for all their light colors, and they use a red oxide for all their dark colors that they paint cars. And in our industry, even if you're printing on polyester, you're going to use an underbase gray as a dye blocker. Using a gray or a khaki as an underbase has clear advantages for true color consistency. If you're ever printed royal blue, Kelly green, and you print it on a white underbase, it completely lightens that color because those inks are a little bit more transparent. But with a kind of a khaki gray, you're going to hold truer color, you're going to consume far less white ink, and you're going to have a better looking print. So what we're going to do is start out, I pulled 6 light colors, and we actually have an old quart of black that we're going to mix in last. So we have a khaki, we have kind of a peach color, a mauve, a kind of teal, and a gray. So I'm going to go ahead, use our scoop, and put these into the gallon bucket and mix them together.
It's a good way to get ink off your shelf too. We all have a lot of ink on the shelf. Having this type of music playing in the shop kind of soothes you a little bit as you mix the color.
So what you can see here, we got a kind of a plethora of bubblegum colors that we have in the bucket. We're going to start mixing these together. And once we get it stirred in, then we'll see how much black we want to add to it to give us that gray. So as you can see here, we've mixed our colors together, and we have a kind of a warm gray color. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of black to it. And again, in the previous video, we're not really going by weight or measuring these because this is just ink that's on the shelf. And we know as we blend, throughout the year or as the weeks, it's always going to be a little different each time. And we'll mix our black in. And there you have it. A really nice gray to use as an underbase, a way to save on our white ink inventory and hold truer color on your print. For more tips, techniques, and information on screen printing, visit gogsg.com, follow us on social media, and we'll see you next time.
All right. So if we're not following a recipe, Mark, how do we guarantee that the Pantone color is going to match if we used that technique for printing?
It's going to affect, well, do you mean matching the?
Yeah, so we use that gray for 375, and then 3 months later, we use a different color as the underbase. That could affect the color, correct?
It could, if it's going to affect the color, I would not use it on any jobs that you do with any repeatability. You know what I mean? Like if you mixed it a few months later and it was a little darker, it's going to affect the color on top. So I wouldn't use it for a repeat order. You know, we did that kind of during all the supply chain shortages because people were consuming so much white ink, you know, just for underlays. And I had a lot of customers inquire like, hey, I can't get white ink, you know, the proper white ink or the one they usually use. Can I use something else as an underbase? Some of the customers were specific on we need the colors to match. Others were not. So what I would do in a case like this, if you want that color to match, that's when I would weigh out each color that I put into it, or I would use the recycle feature in the IMS software, put in the Pantone colors I have and see what color I can make out of it. So I know what my base color would be.
Right. So you're specifically making 423 or something.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Not that screen printers ever wing it.
Yeah, right. So we would never wing it in this industry.
No.
So Josh, we knew he would have a question. He has a question. So when adding reducers, at what percentage do you start to affect the opacity?
For a reducer, like say curable reducer, I assume he's talking about.
Yeah.
Right at about 5%, you're going to start to affect the opacity. That's why you're better if you want to reduce an ink is actually to use viscosity buster. So you're adding a pure plasticizer into it. You're limited at a max of 1.5%, and it's not going to affect your color or your opacity. It's going to break viscosity.
Also, if you're trying to get a softer hand on the print, you might want to go up in mesh count.
Correct.
So anyway, so printing process and effect on color. It's all about controlling the variables, and we've got a bunch. So let's talk about them. So the first one is screen tension. How does screen tension play into color matching?
Screen tension, you're not going to have a consistent lay down of ink for your print. You may have a heavier spot or a lighter spot because of the way that screen is going to peel away. A real low tension screen could actually lift the ink, lift the color right off.
So if you've got an issue where your problems with wet on wet, if you've got higher tension screens, and you've got an issue where, you've got lower tension screens, you know, like 18s and 17s and stuff, and you're trying to print wet on wet, and all your ink is picking up, and that's affecting your color on press. If you get higher tension screens and you print faster, because higher tension screens allow you to print faster, what happens is you don't get as much pickup, so your ink stays opaque, and that helps you control your color. What about EOM?
Well, your EOM, the first thing I do is go into a shop. I check to see if I can feel the stencil, if I can feel that ink well that's on the back of it. If you can't feel it, you're already going to be fighting an uphill battle because the EOM is going to determine how much ink you're laying down on the garment. Without an EOM, you're typically pushing that ink into the actual substrate, which is going to pull up fibers, give you more of a rougher feel. And it's evidently at the end going to affect the color because you're just not laying enough ink down.
What about squeegee durometer? How does that affect things?
Well, the softer the squeegee, the more ink it's going to lay down. A dull squeegee is going to lay down more ink. You want to have the proper durometer. You want to have a sharp squeegee and just shear that ink, drop it through the screen. So it depends on what you're printing. You're going to go with a softer squeegee if you're doing, some shimmers, glitters, any, some specialty inks or bases. But typically, presses come regardless of the manufacturer, usually a 70 or 75 durometer squeegees. You might want to look into triple durometer squeegees, be it a 60-90-60 for your whites or your heavier deposits, 70-90-70s for your top colors. So you can really control the amount of ink that's going through the mesh.
What about the angle?
More angle, more ink. So angle is extremely important. You'll see all the different shops I go to, I see almost 0 angle, 10% angle, all the way to the squeegees really laid out. When you're laying the squeegee out, you're putting down too much ink, which leads to, like you said, for wet on wet, more buildup on the back of the screen. You're lifting up more more ink on that mesh under the screen. So you want to stay in about that 15-degree angle and adjust it in or out after you do a few test prints.
What about the garment or substrate color?
Well, like we showed in those photos, you can see how the garment color is going to affect the ink, whether it's with an underbase or without an underbase. So that's why there's always testing before you run a job. If you have a job with multiple different, colors on it, you're going to want to maybe experiment with different color underbase to match those colors across the board.
And we already talked about the underbase color, and you don't actually have to use white all the time.
Yeah.
And there's some colors like 202 red or reflex blue or some other colors where you print on top of white, it actually has such a dramatic shift. It's not even close to the same color. So this is why you might want to use a gray or a tan or I've used light blue before, just depends on what it is. And that can help you control your colors that are laying on top. Just repeat what you said in the video about why car companies use what they use for under their paint.
They use the gray for light colored, vehicles, and they use a red oxide for darker colors. That's just kind of that's the standard in the automotive industry. You will also see a tan or a khaki color used. You see that a lot more on a lot of the pastel colors that say like Audi or BMW, Toyota has. If you ever see one wrecked or scratched, it's actually tan underneath.
Yeah. And also in water-based printing, there's bleed block or black, which is actually a black underbase, which freaks out a lot of plastisol printers when we start thinking about using black as an underbase. But that's completely within the realm of what you need to be using.
And if you ever find yourself doing something like we've all seen for like the NBA or NFL, where you have the players' photos on the shirt, and you have 5 different ethnicities and different flesh tones, an alternate underbase of a tan or something like that really helps hold those flesh tones across the board compared to a white underbase.
And then also the lighting, right? So I know I've been to tons of shops where there's dismal lighting by the presses and we don't know what we're doing.
Or if you're going with LED, like a lot of shops are, make sure you get the correct LED.
All right, so let's talk about color spectrometers. My recommendation is the Spectra 1 They make way fancier devices that cost lots of money. Mark, yours that you use was like what, 12 grand or something?
That one's about $8,000. Yeah.
$8,000. This one's $300, but you need a Pantone license because you know Pantone's got to make their money. And this works really great for comparing your sample color to what you've printed to see if it's a match. And here's what we're talking about with the color spectrometer. It's not your eyeballs, it's actually science measuring things. So this is where you can become a 7th degree black belt color ninja.
Yep.
By really learning the science behind color and how it prints. And this is going to give you a competitive advantage over other printers who aren't doing this because you're using tools, you know? So it's really, I'm not going to read all this stuff, but the big thing that I want to get across here is the delta E. That's like when we measure our screens, we measure newtons. In color, we use delta E as the term, and it's kind of like a golf score. We want the lowest number possible. The lower number you have, the better, okay? So effectively, a delta E tolerance value defines an acceptance level in the standard of the target or the target color, right? So here's just some guidelines to go by. If you're less than or equal to 1, humans can't determine it's any different. Between 1 and 2, some people can see, I can't. Okay. Between 2 and 10, you can find some differences. Between 11 and 49, they're more similar than opposite. And then the scale, by the way, goes up to 100. So if you're at delta E 100, that means it's the exact opposite color.
You're really off.
Really what we want in this industry is less than or equal to 5, and that's really considered an acceptable match. So if you've got a brand that really wants their color, you know, their IBM, their McDonald's, their whoever, okay, John Deere, they really are a big deal about their color. This is how you determine that you match their ink color. And so this is something that I would be doing if you're looking into it, and you just need to kind of play around with it to get used to using it. And so we got some shots here of Mark measuring what he printed. So walk us through what we're looking at here, Mark.
What we're looking at is that's our color spectrometer, and it has a small target dot on the bottom. And you set it on top of your printed swatch, your drawdown. Then you press the spectrometer down, wait for it to say complete with a check. Then in the software on your computer, it's going to show you your variance. And how we measure these, that's about a 5-inch print. So we'll do 3 measurements, you know, top, middle, and bottom. And you'd be surprised how the color will change because your print stroke may be a little thicker at the bottom, you know, than it is the top. So once you press it down, it's going to tell you it's tethered to the PC, it's complete. And then on the screen, it's going to show you if you're within tolerance. And so we have the green check mark there, then the tolerances are at the top. Now, all these different tolerances, the DL, the DA, DB, DC, it's reading every color that's in that actual Pantone color 375 that we mixed. So we have our standard name, it knows what to match, and then it tells you the time, date stamped, and the tolerance is there. We're at 2.3, you know, 2, we're good. We're right where we want to be. We don't want to be, like you said, Marshall, over 5. And the little graph here on the left-hand side, the little black dot, that dot appears for each reading that you make. And ultimately, you want to be dead center. And that's few and far between that actually happens. But you need to keep that black dot within the blue circle. And that's going to keep you under that number 5 tolerance. And you can see how each one, the photo on the right, the next dot appeared, and that was at the bottom of the print. And we're almost dead center on that one. It's a great tool to have. You know, the one that you found, the handheld one that I actually realized I had one in the drawer here. It's a great tool. You have a phone app, plug it in, measure it.
You
Yeah.
just have to remember to keep it charged.
Well, yeah, you have to do that.
My currently, it's a Bluetooth thing, and it has just a battery you charge, and mine is not charged, so I can't show it today. So I completely forgot. But
You remember to plug your phone in though.
yeah, so you can if you check out that video I did with Jesse, and we walk everybody through how to use it. So we got some questions here, and we're going to get into common problems and solutions here in a minute. So Daryl wants to know about ever double hit a color unpressed to get a match. Of course.
Absolutely.
That's faster than remixing ink sometimes. It depends on how big the run is, though.
Yeah.
Also, how does your screen mount determine the color or get involved?
Depends what mesh you're printing through. Like I said, we do the drawdowns through a 156. Best thing you can do in your shop is run color through your variety of meshes from 83 up to 305 without underbases as drawdowns, and measure your color across the board. It should not change that much, simply because if you're running a multicolored job and you have everything from 156, 230s, and 305s on that job, you should still hold consistent color on each one of those mesh counts. Your underbase or your garments is going to determine the color far more than your mesh will.
Right. And Owen wants to know, how do you choose between a gray or a tan underbase, or any color for that matter?
For the most part, it's just experimenting. Grays are really good for like any type of reds, greens, blues. A tan underbase is going to be for more of your real bright colors, and then going into your earthy kind of tones.
I know lots of people keep, you can go to any grocery store and buy a composition book like you used back in school, and just keep it at press. And a lot of people jot notes in there about what they use.
Yep.
And so that would be a good way to do that. Also, get your art department involved. So once you determine what you like to use for a particular Pantone color, you should make a note of that, and that should be logged in the art department so they know what to spec next time, so you don't have to go through the struggle all over again 3 weeks later.
It'll take a while to build that library, but it's worth it once it's done.
So let's address some common problems and solutions. So I've got about 5 or 6 of these here, and we're gonna kind of rapid fire at Mark and see what he says. So the first one is color shift over an underbase. So this is, we print a color, and let's just say it's blue, and it lightens up on us. We're at the press. What do we do?
If it's something like a reflex blue, you're printing over white, it's going to become transparent, it's going to be light. There's an instance where you would go with a gray underbase instead of fighting it. I've seen a lot of times where they'll just reburn a screen and do a lower mesh count to lay down more ink. It's still transparent. Then they end up revolvering it and print flash printing that blue, when the simple way would be to change the underbase out on it.
Right. So that's an easy step to make without having to remix anything or change how many front strokes or squeegee durometer or anything. And I'll also throw this out here. If you're trying to dial in the color, it's super important that you only make one change at a time.
Yep.
Regardless of what the next couple of questions are about, because if you change 2 or 3 things, which of them was it that worked or didn't work? We don't know, right? So just change one thing. Don't change the screen and the underbase color. Right?
This is another good instance where having drawdown screens are available, on the manual over in Color Match, or you have them, you can go ahead, have 2 screens, throw the gray in, print it, flash it, and then print that trouble color on top of it off press, and see, hey, changing underbase worked. Then go change it on press.
Yeah, perfect. Next, multiple shirt colors ink shift. So we've got a yellow shirt, a black shirt, and a white shirt, and we can't get the colors to look the same. What do we do?
Again, go to the drawdowns, change it. We have a customer I work hand in hand with that does one of the most popular convenience stores in Texas with the beaver as their mascot.
You can
And
say Buc-ee's.
Buc-ee's, Buc-ee's is on every color shirt you can imagine. And this customer actually formulated and figured out a tan, light brown that they use for the underbase on every of their Buc-ee's shirts. And the beaver matches from tie-dyes to red to green to black.
So it's just experimenting and learning what to do and making notes.
Yeah, you're not gonna, there's no magic button of use this. You really have to, every shop's different. Try it out in your shop, find the ones that work.
Okay. The ink is correct, but not on the shirt. So we mixed our ink, we did our drawdown, but when we go to print it's not right on the shirt. What do we do?
It all depends on the shirt. Are you printing it on underbase? Are you not printing it on an underbase? It's going to look different on a white shirt than it will on a gray shirt. And then as we saw before, it's going to look different with that underbase. So it's still, I sound like I'm kicking the proverbial dead horse, going back to testing the colors before you put them on press to run the actual job.
Which is more expensive, press time or the ink room guy doing the testing yesterday for what we're printing today?
Wasted press time is going to be more expensive than testing something a day prior. Absolutely.
Bingo.
Yep.
All right. Different colors on hoodies and tees. So it's the same ink, same underbase, but when I print a t-shirt, it's one color. When I print a hoodie, it's completely different color. What happened?
You tend to probably double stroke on hoodies, especially on your base, on the underbase to get it enough down to fill the nap of the hoodie or the weave. So you're applying, say, more pressure. You have different off contact for a hoodie than you would tee. For the most parts, you're laying down more ink on a hoodie than you are on a t-shirt, and that's going to give you that color shift.
So what's the solution? Like go with a harder squeegee maybe?
Do everything in a distressed pattern with no underbase, and your problems are solved. But yes, go with like a triple durometer squeegee. Control the amount of ink you have going down. The triple durometer is going to be a harder squeegee, and don't be afraid of going up in mesh count on your underbases. I see constantly people use 110s for an underbase. Experiment. Go with a higher mesh count. Get into those 230s, or a 255 for your underbase. So you have the same underbase screens as you're running on t-shirts. Then you don't have a real heavy print either. Yeah.
So what's great about using a higher mesh count for your underbase is your flash time, especially on darks, is less. Yeah. So it's less dwell time. So the gel's quicker, which means that you're printing faster.
Right.
It's all about the yield at that point.
Yep.
All right. Color pickup on press. So we're printing and we're getting a lot of color pickup where it's a 6 or 7 color job. And by the time we get around to the white at the end, it looks like crap. What do we do?
The number one reason, low tension, way too much squeegee pressure. You're pushing that screen down into the ink, into the garment, causing it to pull up, ultimately pulling up color and also the fibers of the garment. The tension, like we talked about before.
I followed the formula, but I got the wrong color. My ink guy used to say this all the time to me. What's the answer, Mark?
You forgot something in the recipe, or you mixed it wrong. There is a chance, it's a slim chance that sometimes a formula could be wrong in the software, but most likely it was mixed incorrectly.
Yep. Funny how when we mix it again, it's always right.
It always matches the second time.
Yeah. But now we got $50 worth of ink we can't use.
Make it into gray or black.
Yep. Okay, what about using multiple brands of ink? I've got Rutland, I've got Wolflex, I've got One Stroke, I've got QCM. Can I mix all that and get an accurate Pantone color?
Chances are no, because the pigment loads are going to be different. If you have a Rutland mixing system, a Wolflex mixing system, and a international coatings mixing system, they're not compatible to mix those colors. You have to stick with one brand of ink for a mixing system.
Yeah, I like to think of this as the ingredients, right? So it's the ingredients that we're putting in there. That ink, the ink mixing system was formulated for what is in that pigment bucket.
Right.
And that's what you should be using. If your wife has a favorite cookie or brownie recipe and you switch up to the vanilla, it always tastes different.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same.
And depending what system you're using, like you can't mix PCs with finished, and you can't do Rio with equalizer. Has to be one.
Mhm. What about automatic versus manual printing? I'm looking at you people who like to sample on a manual. Why does it always look different?
It's controlling your variables. You have a human pushing or pulling the squeegee, so the amount of ink going down isn't going to be as consistent as an automatic press.
Mhm. This is key. So if you've got a key client, you're running a job on the auto, and to save time, you sample it on the manual,
Mhm.
and now you can't match the sample on the auto. It's because your manual printer double stroked or triple stroked the color to make it look pretty.
Or held the screen a little to the left to keep it in register and hit it multiple times.
Yeah. So I would always recommend sampling on the press that you're going to run the job on.
Yes.
Just do it at the end of the day and send it off for approval. And when they approve it in the morning, it's already set up and you can run. That's like the easiest thing to do. All right, so that's all of our prepared scenarios, and we're just a little beyond our time. So anybody have any questions? We're going to hang out here for a minute. Please add them to the chat. We'd love to be able to diagnose and help you with your Pantone color match issues. So we'll kind of just hang out here for a minute. And while we're waiting, so Mark, what do you think is the most problematic color? Just as a Pantone color. Do you have one that people always struggle with?
Yeah, reflex blue, ultramarine blue, a lot of the blue family. They tend to be transparent, and a lot of times we see those issues. It could be the underbase, but you run into with transparent colors, you run into mesh interference. And if you ever seen kind of a print with a wave going through it,
Yep.
It's actually the mesh of the top color picking up the mesh pattern of the color underneath it.
Yeah. I've on some colors, I've added just a teeny tiny little bit of white, and that always seemed to help sometimes. Not a whole lot. Be careful.
But write down how much white you put in it.
A tiny little bit, and that always seemed to help sometimes. But I would recommend just changing your underbase more so, right? And the color that I hate is a 485 red. In fact, I wrote a blog article about it 10 years ago. 485 is the color of the devil, was the name of that. And it's just because it's a very orangey red.
Is it red or is it orange?
And people think it's too orange.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's dead on exactly perfect, they'll go, that's the wrong color.
Yep.
And I hate it. So I'm always like, you sure you want that? A 186 is a much better choice for you, buddy.
Exactly. Or go with national red.
Yeah. Right. All right. I don't see any questions. Oh, here's one. Chat disabled. Oh, you know what happened is that we're past our time, maybe.
I was going to say, that's an interesting name, chat disabled.
We'll put it in the Q&A question instead of chat. So, I don't know. So Owen says, I always end up hitting my underbase 2 times. Am I putting on too much? To me, the answer is yes. I want you to try to do it with 1 stroke.
Yeah.
Figure out how come you can't get to the opacity you need with that 1 stroke. Because it doesn't have to be perfect, because you're putting down other colors on top. It just has to be enough to make a foundation.
You know, another thing that really helps with underbases is going with thinner thread mesh. You know, go with a smaller or thinner thread, allows you to lay down, you know, more ink with that single pass.
Right, right. All right, well, I don't see any more questions, so we're just going to call it a day here. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks so much, Mark, for your time today. I appreciate your patience as we went through some technical difficulties earlier. So I really appreciate you, and also GSG's ongoing sponsorship of Shirt Lab. We really appreciate you guys. So thanks a lot. Mark, so again, if somebody wants to reach out to you, maybe they've got some questions, can you give them your email again? Just say it out loud.
Yeah, it's just mark.suhadolnik@gogsg.com. I'd have to spell the name out, but it's in the beginning of this.
Yeah, you should look it up. So anyway, so videos for this will be available. And we'll have it on our Shirt Lab Tribe Circle, and I'll be emailing everybody a video. We're going to do a little editing, and then we'll shoot it out to everybody probably tomorrow. So thanks for joining. Appreciate you guys.
Great. Thank you very much.